Our intro. Hi, guys, and welcome to Wine Wednesday with All of in Law. So, tonight we're going to be talking about what to expect when you're expecting to become the executor or trustee for someone. Surprise!
No baby announcements from All of in Law today, guys. But welcome to Wine Wednesday with Stephanie and Chantel. And as you just heard, today we'll be talking about what in the world do you need to expect when someone gives you that phone call and says, hey, do you have any issue or would you be happy to serve in a legal role as, say, a trustee, backup trustee behind me, or an executor, which is also known as a personal representative for my last will and testament? What do you do? What are the questions you're going to ask?
Yes, or if you're really lucky, you might not even know that you're named. And surprise, something will happen to your family member, and you'll find their lovely estate planning documents and see your name right there in black and white.
And you're just like, I have to do what? And then you start reading and you say, I have to do what? And that's when you start asking around to say, have you gone through this? Have you gone through this? You start texting. You're very concerned about, you see these legal duties that you have. You're very confused. And it's time to take a breath and know that we're here to answer your questions.
Yes. So we'll kind of start by talking about why is this important? To know what's going on and to know about your role if you're named in these documents. And so there's a special term that we like to use called a fiduciary role is what it would be. And it's just a fancy legal term that says you're in this really special role and you have these really important duties to the people in an estate, to the beneficiaries of the estate, to the beneficiaries of a trust.
And what is that fancy term?
A fiduciary.
Fiduciary. Fiduary? Fiduciary? Is that it?
No, you forgot the C.
This is why I never participated in a spelling bee, so let's just skip over that part. Fiduciary. It also means trusted, loyal, person who has a lot of legal duties to a lot of people, including if you have a will that needs to be probated, including a judge. And that is very intimidating, and we're here to try and reassure you that it's not as intimidating. It's kind of like life. Stay on the straight and narrow, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah, just follow the rules, and you're going to be okay. So that's why we like to tell people it's good to at least consult an attorney.
Yeah.
Talk to one. Figure out what's going on. Figure out what your job's going to be so that you can fulfill your role and these really important legal duties and know that you're doing the right thing. Because a lot of times when we get phone calls from clients who are dealing with probates in court or they're dealing with trust administration, that's a lot of their fear is, what should I be doing? I feel like I should be doing something. Am I doing something right? Am I doing something wrong? And so an attorney a lot of times can help walk you through that and kind of ease some of those worries that you might have.
Yeah, a lot of our clients will say, well, I'm about to sign this check, or I'm thinking about signing this check because a bill came in. And there's stress that comes with that because they want to fulfill their duty and they want to do it properly. And so what happens is we say, if you have a question, if you have a concern, if you've hired us to do your, not your job, but to guide you along the path, to do all of the paperwork for you, then you can text us, you can call us. This is 2020, you can definitely text us. If you write us so at 10 o'clock, you might not get a response until the morning. Just, throwing that out there. You know who you are.
Yeah. So when we're talking about this, there are kind of two things that you can be named in. So the first thing that we'll talk about is if you're named to be the executor, personal representative, someone like that in a will, and you're going to probate court. Or the family member might not have had a will, but they have property that needs to go to court, and you're the person in the family that everyone was like, congratulations, we think you're the best paperwork person, the best communicator. We would like to have you step forward and do this, please.
They say, good luck with that, but obviously you're the one who's going to do it, and we're just going to stay over here while you do all the legal stuff over there, and you just keep us updated. There are tons of those, and if that's you, just know you're not alone in this. You say, okay, well, I paired up with an estate planning and probate attorney, and they're going to walk me through this, so I got this. There's no problem here.
Yeah, so a lot of your job, if you're a personal representative in a probate, is you're going to get to be the person that the attorney calls and says, hey, I've drafted up this paperwork based on the information that you've given me about your family, about the will that you provided. Gonna need you to come to the office, review it, and sign it.
In light of COVID-19, it's a lot of phone calls that says, all right, you're the information gatherer is the important part of that. If you want the attorney to be the information gatherer, then a lot of the times the personal representative, also known as the executor, and we typically always use the more modern term personal representative, but if you give people permission, like a bank, a financial institution, you would then, your role would be, you have to give them permission and get us on the list of people who can have that conversation on your behalf. And then, of course, we're happy to move forward and do that work for you because we know the legal jargon. We know what to say. We know this is what we need to convey message-wise to get done what we need done and get paperwork that we need to potentially provide to the court or get other beneficiaries to sign off on. So we can do most of the job and we can do some of the job. But if you already have a good grasp of the assets that are involved because the person had good records, then congratulations, that's great. You pass over the folder to your probate attorney, and they get to work.
Yes.
We're little paperwork readers, and we're little paperwork drafters, and we draft those up, and then we send it to you and say, review, and really what you're reviewing is, facts, names, spellings, and addresses. You say it's good to go. We take care of the filing. We get things set for hearing. We keep you posted throughout the entire process. Depending on which county the probate is in, you may or may not have to actually attend the hearing. If you're out of state, you're good to go. But if you're in the state of Oklahoma and the probate's here in Oklahoma, then you might have to attend depending on where it's located. So that's something important to keep in mind. But I'd say it's more often than not, you don't need to attend, which is really convenient for the client.
Yeah, and we have another video kind of talking about the probate process. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can go check that out. But once you get to that point to where you get through the hearing, where you're nominated as the personal representative, your next big task and kind of your main task is handling the assets. You got to go figure out what assets are out there. What bank accounts did mom have? What property did mom have? The fun one. What mineral interests are out there? That's always the kicker for the probates, is the minerals that get left behind in the dust.
Yeah. So many of our probates are just mineral interests. And that's it, because nobody thinks about them. They might think they're actually attached to the land, and land isn't real property. And a lot of people don't know that a lot of times it's not related. It's in a different section, township, and range. And if anyone gets that logo, yay, it's so fun to deal with.
Yes. And then once you get a handle on kind of all of those assets, you got to take care of them. You got to protect them, because that's your job in that role as personal representative. You got to make sure that the lawn is mowed.
Yeah, not so much that you're out in front of the house every night with some nunchucks like, I'm protecting this house. What it is it's your job to make sure that either someone else, like a very trustworthy neighbor, is looking after the house in particular. But the house is also a fun one, because if it's anything other than the dead of winter, then that grass is growing here in Oklahoma. And the key here is, if a house is not going to have somebody in it and it's not going to be occupied, then the goal is to make the house seem like it is occupied. So you have to have someone continuously cutting the grass. You need to have the mail forwarded to your or somewhere else that's appropriate, that address, so that the mail's not spewing out of the mailbox or packages are not, accumulating on the front porch. You want to leave a light on, just like when you go on vacation, little things like that. But little signs that tip bad people off to that the house is not occupied. The house is a big priority for making sure that asset is protected.
Yes, and so you're going to have bills. You got to keep the lights going. You got to keep the water on. Make sure any trash is taken out if you're going and cleaning the house. And so with that, you have to keep really good records. And you're always going to need to keep good records, but especially in a probate, you're going to be submitting that stuff to the court if you're trying to get reimbursed for those expenses, and you're going to say, I spent $21.33 on the gas bill on this day.
It's a good bill.
Yeah, that would be a nice bill to get. It might be more. But you have to keep those accounting records, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to submit all of this to the court and say, here's all the assets that I had, here's all the money that I had, here's what expenses I had to pay, here you go, the math works out.
And the entire discussion about if you have an attorney who represents you as the personal representative of the will, which goes to probate court, is there's just a range of how involved the attorney actually is. Attorney's work naturally does cost money, but you could do, say, the one extreme, and everything that comes in the mail, you just stick it in a box, and then every once in a while you say, I'm dropping off the box, and you say, okay, and they drop off the box, and we go through it, we scan it in, so there's always a record of everything that's ever come in the office. And we make the list. We make the inventory, which is just a list of the assets and their approximate values. We keep, a handle on the creditors, like the super cheap gas bill that apparently came in. But we keep records of those things. And then there's the other extreme, to where they say, we are going to give you this information because we are over here with our fancy Excel sheet as the person who's an engineer. And I will send you this Excel sheet where you see all this backup information. Or it could be a handwritten piece of paper that goes through, here's everything that came in, meaning here's all the money that we got and cashed out this one life insurance policy because no one was listed as a beneficiary. So we use that EIN, that employer identification number you got us from the IRS. We opened a bank account. We got the proceeds from the life insurance, dumped it into the bank account, so that money came in to the estate. But then, with permission from the judge and making sure everything was good to go, we then paid these house bills, the water, the gas, the electric. So those things went out. And all of that has to be recorded and accounted for by the time you want to try and close up the probate or a trust administration, which we'll get to in a little bit.
And that's the thing to keep in mind with these probates. You can't make a move without getting court approval. If you want to sell the house, you got a buyer that's here and says, I got my cash ready, let's do this. You have to pause. And you have to hopefully call an attorney and say, I have a buyer. What do I do? What do I do? And we'll say, you got to do some paperwork and we got to go to court to make sure that this is okay. And the judge will have to approve that you're selling this property for the appropriate amount of money.
Yeah, there was one thing that one of my friends approached me and sent me a screenshot of a Zillow ad for a house and said, what in the world does this thing mean? It says, sale is subject to PB-2020- whatever the number is, and that's an easy answer. That means that person who's trying to sell the house is not going to sell that house until they get judge and court approval. So while you might say, I'm the highest bidder and I'm the one who's going to buy this, that's great and all, but you're going to have to get the judge to sign off on paperwork that says, I have blessed this sale. You may now move forward with the closing.
Yes. And so, important, keep track of everything and have a wonderful attorney who can help you through that process and you'll be okay. And then at the end, you'll get some more paperwork that says, good job. you're officially done with your job. You can breathe easy now.
Well, one of the big things that those people who serve in that role is the CYAs, which we won't say what that means, but you got to cover that behind of yours. And you want to do the most legal, upright thing in your role, in your fiduciary role. So what you want to happen is you want everyone to be on the same page. And there are certain things that attorneys are always trying to do that. We're always trying to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Everyone understands what's happening in the court process. So letters get sent out to the other heirs. They get sent to the personal representative. Of course, we keep people updated throughout the process so everyone's on the same page so that when it comes to the end of the day, we close the probate. We don't want questions to ever pop up at the end of the day. So that's why the attorney's role when they're involved is to be very meticulous and to make sure that everyone got the notices they were entitled to. Everyone was on board with the sale of the property. Not that they have to approve of it, but we want them at least in the loop of knowing about it, because what happens when you sell the property, even though you did, say, mail them notice of it, and then a month later, after the closing, they say, how dare you have sold mom's house? You weren't supposed to do that. I wanted that. Those are things we want to avoid at all costs. So there are certain ways that you can cover your behind as you move forward in your role as a personal representative of a probate. And that's definitely good to have an attorney on your side to help guide you through that process.
Yes. And so the role of being a trustee of a trust, which is just a fancy term for the manager of the trust, is very similar, but different in the sense that you're not in court. So when you get a trust, you start out as being the trustee, the manager of the trust, and it really doesn't look different for you because you're just going about your day-to-day life as you normally do.
So long as you don't have any specialty type of trust. That
Yes.
is a story for multiple wine Wednesdays away.
Yes. But if it's just your normal run-of-the-mill revocable living trust, as we like to call it, everything looks normal to you. It's whenever something happens to you and then your family member, your friend, a professional steps in and becomes what we call the successor trustee. So,
Backup trustee is all that
Yes.
means. Who's going to fill my shoes?
yes. And so for this, it's a little different because the backup might step forward not when you're passed away, but they can also step forward if you become incapacitated for some reason. You can no longer manage your assets on your own. So that can give a little bit of a difference between the two in you being an executor versus a trustee.
Or you just don't want to. That's also a fun fact. You can say, I'm done with this whole check writing business. So I have the legal paperwork that says you can go start signing my checks and making sure my bills are paid. I'm above that. I'm beyond that. I'm living my life. I'm on the golf course every day. I don't need that. And you can appoint someone as a successor trustee to step in even before you're incapacitated, but those are fun circumstances. But that person is very similar to the personal representative of a will that needs to go through the court process. And this person, thankfully, gets to avoid court, and they get to manage all of the assets. And their role as trustee / manager, overseer, is to work in the best interest of the beneficiaries of the trust, which could include the trustee as well, and in the best interest of the assets. And there's a balancing act between those two for sure. But they also have to follow the instructions of the trust. It's just like reading a little manual. It says the do's and it says the don'ts. And your job as a fiduciary who has a very important role toward the trust, which includes the deceased, potentially, person who created the trust, the beneficiaries, the trust assets. You're liable for all of those things, and you need to be looking over, as best you can, getting the assets together, figuring out what to do with the assets within a reasonable time. Some trusts might lie out a deadline. Not all the time does that happen, but it's a reasonable time. So, in COVID-19, you potentially didn't get your taxes done until Well, today, actually.
Yeah, July 15th.
So you might not have gotten your taxes done when you could have. But it's your job to be on the ball. To be like, all right, I got my list. These are the assets. Time to figure out what to do with them. There's also, important to note, a time for mourning. In these cases, it's not always something that happens the day after someone passes away. Sometimes it is. I've gotten that call the day after someone passes away to say, well, now I'm well aware that I'm the backup trustee or I'm the personal representative, so what do I need to do now? Other people, it could be years before they find out they even are in this role or that they actually have to do something in these types of roles. So there's no time frame really for that because, heck, you might not even know about it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's very similar in that you have to marshal the assets. You got to go figure out what all's in there. You got to figure out if something was left out of the trust. Surprise, surprise.
Minerals.
It happens. And then you got to deal with the probate on top of dealing with your trust administration. That's always a fun one whenever we get that phone call as well. Mm-hmm. People are generally not too excited about that.
Yeah, but we're here to try and put a smile on your face.
Yes. So unlike the court process, you don't have like, okay, we file the paperwork and then we got to give notice by this time. That whole process, but you still have to let people know. Like, hey, your name's here. Expect something.
What not to expect is to expect to come to the lawyer's office, sit down, have a camcorder that you pop out the tape, stick it in somewhere. They don't even make those anymore. And then you watch. Everybody watches the screen. And we watch a video of the person who has now passed away that says, Johnny gets my shotgun and Ava gets my wedding ring. That's not that common. We've been asked before to do a reading of the will, and that is super dramatic. And if the family wants a reading of the will, the family can have a reading of the will. But the thing that usually happens is you end up sending a letter, or, you know, of course you're going to have phone calls if there is communication and lines of communication are open between the trustee and the other beneficiaries. And what happens is you can chat about it on the phone. They can text about it. But they also, if an attorney is involved, likely to receive a letter that says, hey guys, this is what's going on. I realize that I'm the trustee now. Pursuant to this trust document, probably don't use that fancy of language. It just comes out. I'm very sorry about that. But you will say, you know, here's my understanding of what the assets are. And right now, it's my job to figure out if there are more assets out there. So I might not be doing something right this second and trying to write you a check this second. Very sorry. There are other duties that I need to attend to, like caring for my children or continuing my full-time job at the school. Things like that. That's where everybody needs to be reasonable. Everybody needs to be understanding and caring, but that doesn't always happen.
Yes, it doesn't. But that's why it's good too. You have to keep track of your accounting again. Keep track of what's there, what's going out, why is it going out, are there bills? Just keep a record of it all. Because if something were to happen and someone wanted to cause a fuss, you got to have your backup there and ready to go to show what's going on.
But that doesn't mean that you have all of these backup records and someone like an angry step-sibling sends you a nasty Facebook message saying that they want to know everything under the sun that's happening. That doesn't mean they're entitled to it. But depending on what the trust says, they likely are entitled to the overview of what's going on. So while you might not send them every nitty-gritty detail about what's happening in the background and every single copy of every single check that's gone out, you will probably send them a list, a reasonable list that says this asset is worth this much. The car, thinking it's worth this much. Bank account, oh yeah, there's a safety deposit box. Had some rings in it. Had some certificates of title in it. Those little things like that.
But at the end of the day, with the trust, read the document. figure out what you gotta do. And same thing with a probate. Figure out what you gotta do. Keep track of everything. Keep a good accounting. And you're gonna be good.
But one other thing is that we don't have one, and I'm pretty sure there's one here. We, as attorneys, can be your shield. Don't think ever that you have to go about this alone. You can hire someone who can step up for you and say, I am the person because this trustee or this personal representative of the probate, they are represented by an attorney. And that is an instant block to try and stop communication from harassment, from bullies. And we are not a fan of bullies. And we get that call a lot that says, well, I did this because this beneficiary told me that I had to, or they were going to sue me. And then we instantly get a little upset and we're ready to go because we don't appreciate that, because we like to think we're good people and we think that other people should treat others with civility and kindness. And if someone is being rude to you, we will happily step in your way, block you, and say, you talk to us. You don't have to talk to them. You've done your duty of being super rude to them as a sibling or a step sibling, but your time has come for that to end. So please yell at us, and we will have a lovely conversation and kill you with kindness.
Yes, because unfortunately, when you are put in these roles, you might quickly find out that your siblings aren't as wonderful as what you thought they were.
Emotions can be high.
Yes, it's a lot of things are going on. You have the grief of losing a loved one. You might have underlying family tension coming out, or you might just have not been that close of a family, and it becomes very apparent why that was once, someone passes away. And especially if there's money involved, it can bring out some issues. And you might realize that people can be very mean, to put it nicely.
Yes, that is very kind of you, Chantel.
I know.
But keep in mind that we only covered the general areas, didn't even cover all of the general areas. But if you have further questions that we didn't address, then please feel free to call us, to write on our Facebook page, or even this video, you can post on it. We'll still get notified of it. You can email, text, all the fun 2020 technology things you can do. And we're happy to answer your questions if any of you guys have any.
But thanks for tuning in.
Have a good Wednesday.